All vows, bands, oaths, formulas of obligation, pledges, and promises that we vow or promise to ourselves and to God from this Yom Kippur to the next, we hereby retract. May they all be undone. Our vows shall not be considered vows, and our promises shall not be considered promises. Why in the world do we say these words? On our holiest night of the year, we are going to break our promises. As we recited a few moments ago, the Kol Nidre prayer has always felt strange to me. To recite this Kol Nidre prayer many times has often felt uncomfortable, awkward, even wrong. Yet why do we recite the Kol Nidre prayer year after year? There are all sorts of explanations and theories, but in the months leading up to Yom Kippur, I was determined to find the real reason. I started my journey where we all begin today. I asked ChatGPT. Here was its answer. By renouncing unfulfilled vows and promises of the past year, Jewish individuals can begin the new year with a clean slate and a renewed commitment to fulfilling their obligations. ChatGPT seems to have a nice answer, but not really. There are two issues. If you notice, the prayer Kol Nidre renounces vows we will make this upcoming year, not ones we made this past year. And why would we need to break our promises to make a renewed commitment to fulfill our obligations? If anything, the Kol Nidre prayer should tell us, vow now to fulfill all of your promises. My job as a rabbi is secure for now. I had still not found my answer. I then went the historical route. I learned that several historians have argued that the Kol Nidre prayer was necessary because of forced conversions, the ones that happened in Spain and Portugal in the 15th century during the Inquisition. The theory is that many who converted remained Jews in secret, and then once a year on the night of Yom Kippur, they would make their way to the synagogue to release themselves from the vows they had taken to adopt another faith. This theory really doesn't work. The Kol Nidre prayer was in existence several centuries before the Inquisition. It's also unlikely these secret Jews would have risked torture or even death if they were discovered practicing their Judaism in such a public way. Really, from an historical perspective, we should have stopped reciting this prayer long ago. For centuries, Kol Nidre created even more hostility from our non-Jewish neighbors. They said it showed that we Jews do not feel bound to honor our promises since we voided them on our holiest night of the year. In fact, throughout the Middle Ages, and in some places until the 18th century, in lawsuits with non-Jews, we were forced to sign an additional pledge because of the Kol Nidre prayer. And so some rabbis found the Kol Nidre prayer problematic, concerned it would lead us, the Jewish people, to treat vows lightly. Yet Kol Nidre continues to be recited in synagogues throughout the Jewish world. It survived all of the doubts, all of the misgivings. Perhaps we should just get rid of it now. Don't tell Ken or Goldman I said that. Instead, Kol Nidre remains the classic expression of the awe and gravity of this night. Its undiminished power defies all obvious explanations. Why? Why do we still say it? After months of research, I finally found the answer from one of my teachers, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zikrono Livracha. I believe it's a compelling answer with practical implications. Let me explain. Just a few months after all the miracles God performed for our people to get us out of Egypt, what do? They worship a golden calf. And here was the challenge. God had made a vow to destroy our people if we ever worshiped idols. But start over, find a new people. God wants his sense of forgiveness to override his sense of justice. Strict justice hurts humanity. So according to tradition, God regrets his vow, and God decides to have his vow withdrawn. But even for God, this was a challenge, because God's vows could only be canceled out by a scholar. And Moses comes to our rescue. Moses, as the number one scholar, can free God of his promise. Moses does so, as we read in the Torah, Vayechal Moshe, interpreted as God absolved God of his vow. Moses absolved God of his vow. And that's why Kol Nidre has the power that it has. For it recalls the Israelites' worst sin, the worshiping of the golden calf, then God's forgiveness completed after Moses absolves God of his vow, and then descends from Mount Sinai a second time, this time with 2 new tablets. What was the date? The 10th of Tishrei, today's date, the very first Yom Kippur, the first time our people was given a second chance. Yom Kippur is purposely done on the anniversary of the great act of divine forgiveness, and that forgiveness from God was the result of Moses' act of canceling God's vow. Hence we must have the Kol Nidre prayer. Forgiveness is so important, even God can break a vow in order to forgive. In our tradition, you and I can look to God as a role model. Yes, we should always strive to fulfill our promises. The oaths and vows we make are, of course, important. But like God, are there times when we can let them go? If God can do so in order to forgive, are there times we too should do the same? How often does someone else upset us, and we promise to ourselves, I'm never going to forgive that person? Never, we tell ourselves. It doesn't matter that they may be truly sorry for what they did. With all of our being, we pledge we're going to make them pay for what they did by never talking to them again. We're going to hold on to our promise. We're not going to even give them the chance to re-enter our lives. We write them off completely. We become so stubborn, unrelenting, to the point where we think we are keeping them in pain because they can never speak to us again. My friends, the reality is, I'm not so sure they think about us too much, or even about what happened. Or they may know that they did wrong, but they may feel sorry for what they did. They may even have learned from their mistake, become better people. But we have no idea, because we won't even give them a chance. Yes, our Jewish sense of justice demands that the offender must earn forgiveness. We don't excuse unremorseful wrongdoers or their culpability merely as an act of love. On Yom Kippur, we don't forgive just so we can move on. Putting out one of those Facebook posts during these high holidays, I forgive anyone who has wronged me, that doesn't count. Actually, the funniest post I saw was last week. It said, to all those I have offended, hurt, or embarrassed this year, think very hard why I did that to you. It's still not too late for you to apologize. But my friends, too often, we don't even let those who wronged us have the opportunity to seek forgiveness. We don't even give them an opening to explain. Instead, we like to hold on to their mistake. Maybe we like having a sense of righteous indignation. We were right, they were completely wrong. I can continue to be in control by not even letting them explain. I've done it too. Years ago, I thought someone in our congregation had wronged me, and I promised myself not to even give him a chance to explain. I thought by doing so, I was in charge. But the reality was, he was in control because his mere presence upset me. Eventually, I matured enough to seek a meeting, and it turned out he felt terrible for what he had done. He was truly sorry. And that vow I had made not to even meet with him only prolonged my anger. I should have known better. I know that for some of us, it's not just people in the community, colleagues at work, or old friends. Sometimes it's people in our own families, even people we may live with. We don't let them tell us they are sorry. We'd rather not even discuss it. Maybe we don't like confrontation, especially with a loved one. Or maybe deep down, we want to hold on to something against our loved ones, even against our loved ones. So we resign ourselves to just living with the deep-seated bitterness. We fool ourselves into believing that this is a better way to go on. Really, it's the worst thing we can do. For in my work, some of the most depressed people I encounter are those who live with resentment. I've seen the negative energy it takes to harbor anger, hostility, and indignation. It's exhaustive. It's not good for us, and it's not good for the people around us. In fact, living as a victim is a miserable way to live. Victimhood does nothing but prolong our agony. It accomplishes nothing. But how often do you and I hold on to the anger as if we can outlive it? The anger always catches up with us. It affects our physical well-being. It's toxic for our souls. 4 years ago, I spoke about how my brother and I didn't speak for years. And the effects of Hurricane Harvey finally provided the opportunity for the forgiveness we both needed. We should have reconciled earlier. We lost years together that can never be replaced. I still have members asking for that sermon. I learned that we are not alone. Perhaps you have a family member, a family dispute that has lasted so long you can't even remember the original cause of the fight, only that the other side is wrong. Or maybe you remember exactly what was done to you, when and where it took place. Even if the other side has moved on, you have vowed to always remember. You think they will then pay for what they did. But perhaps you are the one who is truly suffering. During these days, we put a lot of emphasis on memory. We recall our actions that we can make atonement and change our ways. But in the Musaf Amidah, the prayer at the heart of the Rosh Hashanah service, we refer to God as Zocher Kol HaNishkachot, the one who remembers what has been forgotten. God is the one who recalls even that which is forgotten, because only God can handle remembering everything. We don't have to. As it's been said many times, holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to be ill. Yes, refusing to forgive is letting someone you despise live rent-free in your head. The story is told right before Yom Kippur. Two congregants who've had a long-standing fight see one another in the synagogue. One says, it's a new year. It's time to put an end to the bickering and fighting. I want you to know that in the new year, I wish for you everything you wish for me. And the second congregant says, so you're starting up with me again. My friends, could forgiveness cure us of our emotional scars? To give the chance for forgiveness is to admit you too are in need of its powerful healing powers, improved health, peace of mind, restored relationships. It's to admit that you are also human. Maybe forgiveness is in order for the cruel things said to you when you have shared similar words, for the time you felt insulted when you've also offended others, for the business, relationship, or experience taken from you when you've done the exact same thing. For when we forgive, perhaps we are then worthy of being forgiven. This powerful and holy day of potential reconciliation comes around once a year. It's a gift. It can be a gift from God to remind us life is too short to dwell on those who did us wrong, especially when we give them no chance to seek atonement. When looking back over his life, Mark Twain wrote, "There isn't time so brief as life for bickerings, heartburnings, callings to account. There's only time for loving, and but an instant, so to speak, for that." Yes, I know sometimes it's not easy, but we hurt too much. We nurse too many grievances. That's why we have the Kol Nidre prayer. We must have it. Because the prayer reminds us that even for God, it was also difficult. Yet on this very day, thousands of years ago, even God released his vow to allow for the great power of forgiveness. Can we too free ourselves of those promises that are doing us no good for the great possibility of understanding, repairing, and rebuilding, to be liberated from the past, to build a better future? Yes, the potential for a better year sometimes, it is up to us. All vows, oaths, and promises we hereby retract. May they all be undone. Our vows should not be considered vows, and our promises should not be considered promises.